Hello, hello, YouTube and Rumble community, and many thanks for joining this simultaneous stream on both channels of mine on these platforms. Many thanks to all the members of our community who will join either later on or will watch this video of this live stream later on. Today is, of course, 24th of June. Now it's 11 o'clock in the morning Moscow time, and I have prepared quite a number of news on some major developments, and hopefully you will find this episode informative and useful. After news segment, I will take 15, 20, maybe 30 minutes to be engaged with the chat, and I will try to answer questions or the comments that I see. Yesterday, I announced this change in live streams. So after each live stream, let's take like 15, 20, 30 minutes to have a conversation, exchange of opinions in real time. That might be helpful for our community, something good. And so that's been said, dear friends. Of course, to make sure that I would not miss your question or the comment that you want to highlight, you can always use PayPal platform to use to send your question, or Boosty platform. That way you will support my work, this project, and same time will make sure that I'm not going to miss your question. And also you can use a super chat feature on Rumble, or Rant as it called there, for this purpose. Unfortunately, my channel is not monetized on YouTube, so therefore there is no such option there, only on Rumble. That's been said, dear friends, let's start this live stream news segment of it. And first of all, of course, a major breaking news for now, which is that Iran and Israel announced a ceasefire after 12 days, isn't it? It's 12 days of hostilities. So I have this report from RIA Novosti that Iranian TV channel Press TV reported that ceasefire with Israel has come into effect after, several waves of Iranian missile launches towards Israel, military and logistical targets in Israel. And Israeli leadership also made a statement that ceasefire is in effect now. Before ceasefire, Israel also launched another strikes on Iran, and according to reports that I see, as a result of these strikes, there are casualties on both sides. But of course, major development now is ceasefire itself, which is, I will argue, definitely good, great news for Middle East and for whole world in general, because there seems like Israeli leadership, Zionists and their partners, being neocons in US or the globalists, experienced first major defeat on a geopolitical scale, first for the last number of decades. And I will explain what I mean in a minute, but let's go through chronology, what was happening in previous 24 hours. Before ceasefire was declared, Iran launched a retaliatory strike on biggest US air base in the Middle East that is located in Qatar. Dozens of missiles were launched, and according to reports, 6 missiles actually managed to bypass Qatar's air defense systems and hit air base Al Udaid, yet again biggest one in the Middle East according to reports. But local authorities in Qatar, also US representatives, stated that there were no casualties as a result of these Iranian retaliatory strikes, and no significant damage to this US military asset, airfield. And before Iran launched this retaliatory strike against US military base, and retaliatory for earlier US strike on Iran's nuclear facilities, Iranian authorities informed the Qatari side, Qatari leadership, about incoming missile strike against US military asset, and also stated, Iranians, that they have no issues with the Qataris, and the Qatari residents, Qatari citizens are safe. This precise missile strike is directed exactly at their military base as a result of work of air defense systems of Qatar, and I guess US and whichever other NATO country is presented there. Fragments of Iranian missiles and also AD missiles failed in some residential areas, but yet again, according to reports, there was some damage, but no casualties reported about it. And well, what can I say, dear friends? After U.S. strike on Iran, I was sharing my take on the situation, and my opinion was that Iran should exercise restraint and either focus on a political resolution, on diplomacy, or if they will find it absolutely necessary in Tehran that they have to retaliate militarily, then they should use the very same strategy as they did when during the first presidency of Trump, U.S. militaries killed the head of Iran's IRGC, Soleimani, General Soleimani, when as a retaliatory strike, Iran launched a missile attack on U.S. base, although upfront, U.S. militaries were informed upfront to be, as a result, evacuated so that there would be no casualties as a result of the retaliatory strike of Iran. Nevertheless, there were, according to reports, a number of dozens of U.S. militaries as a result of that strike several years ago were experiencing concussion and that kind of stuff, but no one was killed, right? And that's exactly what Iran did this time around. They informed Qatari leadership and subsequently U.S. leadership that missile strike is coming, and even though, according to reports, this base was already evacuated several days ago, just in case Iran warned U.S. as enemy to evacuate its personnel if there is anybody there on the base, so that there would be no casualties. Clever move, right step from Iran for sure, because this was a signal from Tehran that they don't want further escalation with the US, and they are open for the escalation. And that is the right move because, as I said, dear friends, many times before, main goal of globalists and their puppets or their assets in US, their allies, let's say, okay, was to provoke regional war in the Middle East, right? Regional war in the Middle East on sectarian and ethnic lines, so that they would be able to basically shut down navigation in the Persian Gulf and through Hormuz Strait for a long time. And as a result, they will strike China big time, right? Chinese economy big time, then force China as a result to increase its dependence on Russian energy supplies towards the critical level. And final goal of in this geopolitical game of West was and still is to achieve all this stuff, and then to provoke, once China is dependent on Russia on a strategical level, to create tensions between the two, and basically with use of their assets that they might have in both countries, and then to basically corner China and force it to take some military action to secure closest oil and gas fields, and where closest oil and gas fields are from China. It's Central Asian republics of former Soviet Union. First of all, Kazakhstan, that is bordering China. Also Turkmenistan, by the way, which is rich with natural gas. And obviously Russia. So that is, by the way, main goal of the globalists when it comes to their confrontation with the global South, with the emerging multipolar world. They wanted to provoke tensions between China and Russia, and then to corner China and force it to go to escalate with Russia, including militarily, right? And therefore, I was saying all these days that in no circumstances Moscow and Beijing can allow globalists, collective West, to provoke a regional war in the Middle East, because that is a direct threat to national security of the both countries, nothing to be said about rest of the world that globalists have no care about, and the Western ruling class in general. And I think both capitals, Moscow and Beijing, together with the regional capitals, Tehran, Riyadh, Doha, and others, actually succeed in preventing regional war to be provoked in the Middle East, right? So that's why I'm saying that this is a good news for this ceasefire and de-escalation, potential de-escalation, is definitely good news for Middle East and for rest of the world. Although we should be cautious because maybe nothing has finished yet, and there are obviously globalists and their partners in the collective West going to continue their attempt to provoke regional war and to basically go ahead with whatever projects or plans they have in regards to weakening global South, or potentially even provoking war inside the global South and destroying main competitor that way, right? So big success, by the way, for humanity. This ceasefire is, even though I already can see on the internet critical statements towards Iran, why they agree on ceasefire, this was a weakness and so on. I don't think so, dear friends. We should think strategically, right? We cannot base our judgment solely on emotions. That's my take on that. And one should keep in mind, dear friends, that it's not necessarily Iran that showed some weakness. Iran did not show no weakness, actually, I will say. If you take everything in account, then Iran withstood this attack quite well. But a side that show weakness is actually Israel, in my opinion, because it was Israel that, according to even Western media outlets, for example, New York Times, was asking, by the way, Western leadership, US leadership, for example, a Wall Street Journal, for example, Wall Street Journal reported that United States has asked Middle East officials to convey to Iran that Israel is seeking a speedy end to the conflict, right? And many other media outlets also reported about it, that Israel was seeking help from US to basically, end this confrontation, because, and there is some reasons for that, isn't it? There is some reasons for that. Israel exhausted its stockpiles of all sorts of weapons, stockpile of AD missiles, interceptors, a stockpile of ground attack missiles or the bombs, right? Military personnel of Israeli forces being, stuff of ADs, air defense systems, or the pilots, by the way, were also exhausted, right? And if this conflict continues for another month also, let's say, I think whole world will see how weak and vulnerable Israel actually is when it comes to prolong the conflict. But same time, and one might say, if that is the case, then why should Iran not continue? Well, dear friends, Iran don't want no regional war, right? Iran don't want no wars with anybody whatsoever. And Iranian leadership was very clear on that. It was Israel's unprovoked attack on Iran, and then US's unprovoked attack on Iran that created all this tragedy, isn't it? And to avoid further escalation in the region, Iran made the right decision to focus on diplomacy, and they're going to succeed. They're going to succeed if their actions will be based on a rationale, right? Not on emotions, but rational thinking. But as I said, dear friends, this current ceasefire does not mean that Western ruling class is going to stop their attempts to provoke regional war in the Middle East, and they already are using whatever leverage they have and will continue to use this leverage over Gulf states, for example, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain, UAE, to basically persuade them to launch an attack on Iran. And they will use not just threats that they might confiscate whatever assets these countries have in the West, and I can assume most of their financial and other assets that these countries, these oil and gas-rich countries have, is in the Western financial and the banking system. And also, so threat is serious, obviously, but also globalists might use for persuasion of these countries false narrative that Iran is just too weak now. Iran's militaries are decimated. They cannot give a fight, and it is time to attack, right? But hopefully, leadership of Gulf states will not buy this nonsense, right? Because after all, it is better to lose whatever assets they have in the West, in the Western financial and the banking system, but to lose everything, including potentially their lives, right? And I think this rationale actually plays some role right now, because even though Qatar leadership yesterday stated that they will retaliate for Iran's retaliatory strike on US base, and then Saudi Arabia, unfortunately, also went to say that they will support Qatari response to Iran. I think this is more like statements for domestic consumption, and hopefully none of these countries, either Qatar or Saudi Arabia, will take any military action against Iran, because that would be a grave mistake. That would be a grave mistake. First time in a long time, as a result of Chinese diplomatic efforts, Saudi Arabia and Iran are on, if not great terms when it comes to bilateral relationships, at least on a good working level. And this cannot be jeopardized, right? This is in interests of all regional countries to maintain these good working relationships. But as you can see, dear friends, risk is there, right? Risk is clearly there, and therefore no one should be too relaxed that, well, this crisis is over now. No, nothing is over, but humanity has achieved some tactical success. While despite the attempts of the collective West, Israeli allies, Zionists, neocons, globalists, and so on, they were unable to provoke regional war, at least for now. And this is something to be happy about, because, as I said, only these forces are interested in a regional war in the Middle East. No one else, right? So I don't take no criticism of Iran, by the way. We can criticize Iran for many reasons. For example, I mean, how they managed to be that naive to trust U.S. administration, for example, that was engaged in a deception operation all along, right? Together with the Israeli leadership when these talks between Washington and Iran was taking place on nuclear program, or how it happened that Iran's state institutions were infiltrated so much by Israeli secret services. And how come that Mossad and Israeli other institutions had so many assets in Iran? There is many questions for which Iran can be criticized, and probably lessons being learned, and some action will be taken to prevent such failures in the future. But when it comes to current situation, Iranian leadership did actually demonstrated high level of political class. While focusing on diplomacy, I remind you, dear friends, that Abbas Araghchi was in Moscow yesterday. He had a meeting with the Russian president. I'm quite sure, as I said in my yesterday's first and second live streams, most likely Moscow reassured Tehran of Russia's supporter. And also, I'm quite sure Moscow was trying to convince Iran that the best way to go forward is to focus on diplomatic efforts, political efforts, and hopefully this will pay out for Iran, for Middle East, for all of humanity. And I remind you, dear friends, that during the meeting between Russian President Vladimir Putin and the Foreign Minister of Iran, Abbas Araghchi, Russian President stated that there is no justification for attacks on Iran, either by Israel or by US. This was a Russian position all along since the beginning of this crisis. But as I said, nothing is finished yet. Nothing is finished yet, and hostile forces towards humanity, I will say. Zionists, Israeli regime, leadership of collective West countries, Western ruling class, globalists, neocons, you name it. These hostile forces towards humanity will continue their efforts to achieve their goals. And therefore, we have this information that I shared yesterday in the second update, that Netanyahu claims to have interesting intel on Iran's uranium. Right? Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has claimed he has interesting intel on location of Iran's enriched uranium. He made the remarks following U.S. airstrikes on Tehran's nuclear facilities in Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. Speaking to reporters during a briefing on Sunday, Netanyahu confirmed that Israel is aware of location of Iran's 400 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium, but refused to give the further details. And this statement of Netanyahu is, of course, an additional attempt on his part to basically keep US in this war, because obviously, probably I would not be mistaken if I will say that most likely Israeli leadership, Israeli intelligence are there, lobbying US Zionists are putting pressure on Washington, additional pressure, and probably they are using the false narrative that, well, there is another deep underground facility in Iran where this 400 kilograms, 400 plus kilograms of enriched uranium is located, and Israel needs US help to take out that facility. Probably they are working on this direction. They want this US to do the job, right, for them. They want Israel leadership, they want NATO, other NATO countries to be involved also, and therefore one should keep in mind that there is a high risk of false flag operation that will be done by Israeli secret services, that may be done by Israeli secret services and their allies in US intel community and their British intel community, right? Because for decades and decades and decades, they were working together to provoke conflicts all over the world, right? Not just in the Middle East. There is a high risk, yet again, that they will try to come up with some provocation, now also either on US soil or in the Middle East against US military assets. So there is a reason to be extremely cautious and not too optimistic that, well, this crisis has ended. No, there is a lot to do in the future, but well, one of the narratives that Western or Israel and most likely Israeli allies in the West will use, including with their propaganda assets, is this 400 kilograms of enriched uranium. And the process is already underway, because the New York Times, for example, reports that Iran managed to remove 408 kilograms of enriched uranium from nuclear facilities. And New York Times is, of course, one of the leading propaganda tool of the collective West, right? And therefore, to make sure that West would not be allowed to use this narrative of enriched uranium for further escalation, I would not be surprised at all if we will find out sometime in the future that during yesterday's meeting between Russian president and Iran's foreign minister and delegations of the two countries, I mean, obviously, together with Russian president, there was high-ranking Russian officials, and with Abbas Araghchi, there are also other officials from Iran. So these officials might be, among other topics, discuss also transfer of this enriched uranium from Iran to Russia, for example. Russia can take care of it, right? So that Israel or the collective West in general would not be able to use the topic of this enriched uranium for the further escalation. Maybe exactly that will happen. It makes sense to me personally, not to give your enemies opportunity to use this topic against you, right? Let's see how the situation develops, but I think together with this topic, there are going to be talks about enriched uranium anyways, right, at some level. And I think it will make all the sense if international community, at least outside of the collective West, will also focus on Israel's nuclear program, because Iran, for example, demands Israel's nuclear facilities to be handed over to IAEA, and this is absolutely just demand, and I think Iran has to have support of rest of the world on that matter. Israel has not just civilian nuclear program, but Israel has a military nuclear program. Everyone knows that Israel has dozens of nuclear weapons, and it should not. Israel has to be demilitarized and denazified. I said it many times. Current Israel is a fascist state, and majority of Israel is based on all sorts of social studies that I'm aware of. Majority of Israelis are screwed when it comes to their ideology, right? And they clearly have to undergo some denazification programs, by the way, because otherwise I cannot understand how majority of Israelis could be in support of all that crimes against humanity that IDF committed in Gaza and continues to do so. And how majority of Israelis can be in support of blocking humanitarian aid to reach Gaza Strip. So they truly are screwed in their minds, right? In their mentality. And their only way go forward for these people is to, as German people went through denazification program after the Second World War, same has to be done with Israelis. They have to undergo the denazification program and feel the pain that they brought on their innocent people. And then if they will manage to find the courage in themselves, live with that guilt and through that guilt, and rise better generations for a future Israel that would not be fascist or the Nazi. That's the way forward. And definitely this process of demilitarization and denazification means that Israel has to get rid of its nuclear weapons. And IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency, as long as this useless at this point organization still exists, IAEA should be able to inspect all the nuclear facilities in Israel, and the world should stand with Iran in this demand, at least outside of collective West, because we all know collective West will support whatever Israel will do, by the way. Some leaders in the collective West might make some critical statements for domestic purposes to calm things down, because society in the West are not okay what Israel does, at least significant part of it, right? And that is the reason why some of the leaders in Europe, for example, are critical nowadays of Israeli actions in Gaza or in the West Bank, but they supported Israel's illegal aggression against Iran. So therefore, you cannot count on Western elites on anything, right? But rest of the world, that's a different story. And also, dear friends, when it comes to possible further escalation in the region, yet again, nothing has over yet, because as I said yesterday in my second live stream, I don't think without CIA authorization, the so-called crown prince of Iran, Reza Pahlavi, would be able to demand regime change in Iran and issue an ultimatum to Tehran and Iranian officials. And that's exactly what he did. I have video of his statement on my Telegram and Twitter X page. You can check what he's talking about. And this is clearly an asset that CIA is keeping in Washington, D.C., right, for quite a long time now. I believe he is in Washington, D.C. And without authorization, he would not go ahead with such statements. Am I correct? So therefore, obviously, it is too early to say that, war is over and the risks are neutralized for Middle East. No, nothing is over. And all regional countries should be extremely cautious now and in upcoming days, weeks, months, to make sure that no Israeli secret services, no US or British secret services will be able to provoke war between the regional countries. And, I don't really want to talk about this Israeli whore, by the way, so-called US President Donald Trump. He made a lot of statements on his Truth Social yesterday, and as you see, I ignored all of it, right? But now we're gonna observe a new wave of deception campaign in US and on a global scale, I guess, because there is already attempts to somehow justify actions of Trump and his administration when it comes to attack on Iran and when it comes to basically unconditional support of Israel from US. And for example, this another new false narrative is that Mary Trump, by the way, niece of Donald Trump, and psychologist allegedly, has suggested that Donald Trump give the order to strike Iran because of their tents associated with their taco nickname, media reported. According to Huffington Post, she said, this niece of Trump, said that acronym TACO, which stands for Trump always chickens out, became popular among opponents after Trump initially refused to escalate in response to Israel's action against Iran. In her newsletter, "They're Good in the US" or "Good in Us," Mary Trump wrote, "It is a long past time to stop attributing any deeper or more intelligent motives to Donald Trump. Despite his cruelty, he is driven solely by primitive impulses to protect his fragile ego from humiliation and to escape the reality of his own inadequacy." And you know what? We can say about Trump whatever we want. He is a narcissist. Obviously, he demonstrates that on a daily basis. And we can say anything, right? But no in this universe, no in any other universe, by the way, any US president will be able or allowed to act based on his or her personal emotions when it comes to military actions of US, right? I'm quite sure there is in US and in many other countries, by the way, especially nuclear ones, probably there is safety measures in place in case head of state that has authority to launch nuclear strikes, in case head of state experiences some mental breakdown, that might happen. After all, they are all humans, right? So there should be some, and most likely is, some safety measures in place when if president of US, for example, starts to take decisions on some emotions and there are some inadequate or unexplainable, based on unexplainable reasons, then action will be taken. And maybe his own security will take him out in that case. There should be some protocol in place for such cases. And most likely is, right? And so don't believe that Trump was launching attacks on Iran while using up to 20, some say 17, some 18 B-2 bombers, part of which was a sort of deception, another part actually participated in a strike. I don't think these kind of decisions are made on some personal, emotional state. So this is clearly a deception campaign. Another one, by the way, which is sort of criticizes Trump. Don't take him too seriously. He's a moron. He's his ego plays too much role and all that kind of stuff. And so we are moving away with these false narratives from real reasoning behind Trump's actions. And real reasoning is that he is basically Israel's whore. He is blackmailed. I'm 100% convinced, by the way, that he is blackmailed by Israeli secret services, by Israeli lobby, right? That's it, man. That's it. And one day, we're going to find out, by the way, that Trump actually was controlled by Israeli secret services. And not just him, but potentially vast majority of his administration, his inner circle for sure, just to make sure that he stays online. That's what it is. And this very same Trump, by the way, commented on statement of former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev, when he said that there is a number of countries that may provide Iran with their nuclear weapons. I paid a lot of attention to the statement of Medvedev yesterday in both live streams, by the way. If you have not seen it, please, and if you have time, please check that streams. I'm not going to repeat now what Medvedev said, but U.S. leader has criticized the former Russian president for suggesting that some nations may provide Iran with nuclear weapons. And well, what can I say? If this topic, by the way, this statement of Medvedev may actually play quite a significant role, in this ceasefire to be reached, and maybe that was the message that was needed. That if globalists, neocons, Zionists continue, then Iran will receive nukes. And maybe that forced them to back down. Is it a possibility, dear friends? Because yes, Medvedev stated that some countries may actually provide Iran with their nuclear weapons. And yesterday, I went through potential countries that some might argue that can give nukes to Iran. Iran has 4 friendly nations right now that, theoretically speaking, can be considered as the ones that may provide it with their nukes. But 2 of these countries will never even consider this. First is Russia. In no circumstances Russia will provide Iran with or any other country, by the way, with nuclear weapons. If there is any agreements in place, Russia might deploy its own nuclear forces there as a deterrent. This is the case with Belarus, for example. But in no circumstances Russia will actually give its nukes to some other party. It's not happening. And in no circumstances China will do this. It's not possible. But there is 2 other countries. One is Pakistan, and Pakistani leadership did make quite strong statements in regards to this escalation with Iran. And another one is North Korea. And I remind you, dear friends, that either on the same day or day after Israel's attacks on Iran, Secretary of Russia Security Council Sergei Shoigu was in visited North Korea, right? And I reported about it at the time, and I said that, well, maybe it is time to appoint Sergei Shoigu as ambassador to North Korea, because it seems like every other week he is there, right? Because several weeks before that, Shoigu was in North Korea again, and what was the reason for him to go in Pyongyang or Pyongyang once again? Exactly like day or two after Israel attacked Iran. And who knows, by the way, who knows, maybe North Korea stated that they're going to provide Iran with maybe North Korean leadership tell the Shoigu that they're going to provide Iran with nukes if this escalation continues, right? Medvedev, for a reason, said in his statement that there are several countries that can provide Iran with nuclear weapons directly. And I see only two countries potentially that can do this. Either Pakistan, and I really have some doubts that Pakistan will risk that much because, and after all, we should keep in mind that influence of US and British militaries and intelligence in Pakistan is still huge, by the way, although I think Chinese influence is decreasing and Pakistan is moving more and more closer to China. But when it comes to North Korea, by the way, North Korean leadership does give no flying Fs, neither about US, neither about UK or Israel, right? So maybe they actually, through Shoigu, send a message for the West to de-escalate. Otherwise, Iran will get nukes directly. And maybe this, by the way, this topic actually play a huge role in current de-escalation, you know? And maybe nuclear deterrent was the key to force Israeli leadership, Zionists, neocons, globalists to back off. Just saying, share your opinion, dear friends, what you think about such possibilities. But anyways, now, of course, everybody is thinking what kind of lessons we can get from this escalation, right? And there are many lessons to be learned, obviously. And this morning, while thinking about it, I write some of the points that definitely needs to be addressed. For example, risks of infiltration of state institutions by enemy intelligence services. Israel clearly demonstrated in past 12 to 18 months that it has a great level of infiltration in Hezbollah and in Iran also. One may argue that even in Hamas, right? So this is a big issue. This is a big topic. And there are all countries in this world, and I'm focused obviously on Russia. I live in Russia, by the way, and I want Russia to be as safe and secure and Russian society as possible. So therefore, I hope Russian leadership will pay a great deal of attention to this topic of risks that certain hostile states might have their assets, and most likely have their assets in state institutions. And after that comes the second point that I want to make, which is that there is a great need to increase counterintelligence efforts. There is a great need to increase counterintelligence work to basically neutralize whatever assets enemies might have in Russian state institutions, right? And one of the ways, by the way, it's easy to say, but done. But when I was thinking about it, I mean, what can be implemented in short time that will, let's say, clear their state institutions from potential hostile assets? And one way that I come up with personally is implementation of mandatory monthly lie detector tests for all government employees, from a district police officer two administrations of villages, towns, cities, state institutions on all levels, by the way, regional and federal. Everybody who is employed by state should undergo mandatory lie detector tests every single month. It's easy to implement. It will only take to create like groups of inspectors, let's call them that, in all the regions of the Russian Federation, and well, it's doable. It's doable. You only need like 3,000 to 5,000 experts that can work with this equipment, and these experts themselves, obviously, as a state employee, should undergo very same testing. So that's the one way, by the way, that you can eliminate presence of foreign assets in your state institutions. And the actions of Israel clearly demonstrated that this is a grave danger, right? When your state institutions are infiltrated by intelligence services of foreign countries. So maybe, and I'm quite sure the Russian leadership is thinking now, but there is clearly need to do something about all the risks, and hopefully intelligence service will further intensify its work, counterintelligence service. And also, I mean, this is easy way, by the way. This is quite easy, technically speaking, to do. Every state employee should undergo a lie detector test every single month. Not once a year, not once in 10 years, every single month. It's just, I don't know how long it takes, by the way, like half an hour, 1 hour, 2 hours. Every state employee can allocate 2 hours in each month, no big deal, to undergo lie detector test. So hopefully someone in Russian leadership will think about it. It's not that difficult to do, right? And obviously, counterintelligence services do have many other ways to deal with infiltration, and hopefully they will further accelerate their work. Also, another point, by the way, how important is Israel did demonstrated that neutralization of their enemy military and intelligence leadership is actually paving the way for success of a military operation. And Israel demonstrated that while attacking Hezbollah, which was decapitated, right? While attacking Hamas, which was also decapitated, and process continues. It's a constant process, right? And while doing so, Israel is not allowing these organizations to regroup, reorganize, right? So clearly this tactic of Israel proved to be effective. And maybe, hopefully Russian leadership will adopt this tactic of decapitating enemy forces, right? And if so, then hopefully leadership of Western-backed terrorist regime of Zelensky will be neutralized as soon as possible, as they should. As they should, by the way. They are guilty of death of so many innocent people in Russia, by the way, so many civilians that there can be no mercy for them. Not in this, not in any other universe, right? So this is another lesson that actually neutralization of enemy military and intelligence leadership is working, and Israel proved that. Another point is that there is a need on significant increase in security of their key military facilities, military and scientific personnel, strategic facilities. I don't think anyone will argue with that. And no one, obviously, maybe even a key point that we should all learn, no one should ever trust representatives of the so-called Western elites or the Western ruling class under any circumstances. Diplomacy was and will be the only tool of deception for these criminals that are in charge of collective West. And by the way, we have so many demonstrations of this that I don't think there is even an argument to make against what I just said. Western ruling class, globalists, their puppet regimes all over the Western world are using diplomacy as a tool of deception. They are never honest and they can never be trusted. And maybe this is the key lesson that we all have to learn, right? On the current situation, in no circumstances, anything to be trusted that comes from the collective West. Share your opinion, dear friends, what you think. There are many other lessons that we all can learn, obviously, but this morning I just took 5 minutes to go through at least several that I come up with, but definitely much more lessons can be learned from this escalation. And by the way, on topic of impossibility to trust Western, collective Western and its officials and so-called diplomacy from their side, well, we have statement of a senator of the Russian Federation who actually, at least indirectly, supports my take on the situation. United States and its allies still do not consider themselves bound by the norms of the international law and are always trying to achieve their goals in any part of the world using force whenever they deem it necessary. This was written on his Telegram channel by the chairman of the Federal Council Committee on Constitutional Legislation and State Building, Andrei Klishas, by the way, and he's on point, absolutely. Hardly anyone will disagree with this statement. We are at the point when Western politicians or Western so-called elites cannot be trusted no matter what, period. And this is very dangerous stage of for humanity, obviously, to face such a reality. But we have to deal with it, right? We have to deal with this situation and be extremely cautious, because in no circumstances we can trust anything and anybody when it comes to Western ruling class. And dear friends, I have quite a number of news left to share in this update, but before I continue, let me notice that, especially for new members of community, that this project is completely independent or fully subscriber funded. And if you like my work, if you want to see potential further development of this project, or at least me to keep these programs running, then please consider to support my work. You can do it through several means. You can donate through PayPal platform or Boosty platform, by the way. You can donate through crypto, and you can subscribe to my Patreon and Boosty pages, where I have quite a lot of extra content on regular basis. And for example, today probably I will have no second live stream, but I will publish second news update on Patreon and Boosty later on in a day. So I'm trying to always have new content, extra content, exclusive for Patreon and Boosty, as my thank for support that I'm receiving from Patreon members or the members on the Boosty. And I see now comment, Vadim Sigida is commenting, Boosty is the same as Patreon. Yes, dear friends, it's a quite similar platforms, although unlike on Patreon, on Boosty you can also donate to the project. So all the links are in the description box under this video, and once this live stream will end, I will pin comment with all the links also. And you can use Rumble, dear friends, because my channel is monetized on Rumble. You can use Super Chatter and also become a premium subscriber. That will be also great support, of course. And many thanks to everybody who supported and continues to support my work and allows me to stay in this field of news and political commentary. Thank you. Dear friends, let's continue with some more news now. And I will start second part of this update with this report that, according to Russian Defense Ministry, during the night of June 24, during the last night, air defense systems on duty intercepted 20 Ukrainian drones over the several Russian regions. 14 drones were intercepted over the Kursk region, 2 drones over the Moscow region, and right now on your screen you can see a result of a hit on high-rise apartment building in Krasnogorsk city, which is Moscow region, by the way, right next to Moscow. And according to reports that I see, at least 2 civilians were wounded as a result of this strike on civilian residential area. So 2 drones were intercepted in Moscow region, 1 drone each over the territories of Belgorod, Bryansk, Oryol, and Smolensk regions. So unfortunately, Kyiv regime, with assistance of NATO countries, continues to launch these terrorist attacks on Russia. And well done to Russian air defense, Russian militaries, by the way, Russian air defense personnel, that they are usually intercepting vast majority of incoming aerial targets. Otherwise, casualty numbers among civilians would be just unimaginable. Interfax is also reporting that, well, as I already mentioned, dear friends, 1 man was injured when a Ukrainian drone hit high-rise building in Krasnogorsk. Unfortunately, according to some other reports, there was another civilian that was also injured. So it's 2 people were casualties of this strike. RT is reporting that, and this is very important news, dear friends, I think, Moscow concert hall massacre carried out in interest of the Ukraine, according to investigators. Last year's terrorist attack on Crocus City Hall, concert hall outside Moscow, which killed nearly 150 people, was intended to destabilize Russia to Ukraine's benefit. Russia's investigative committee said on Monday, marking the conclusion of its criminal investigation. On March 22nd, 2024, 4 gunmen opened their fire inside the Crocus City Hall concert venue and set their building ablaze, killing 149 people and injuring 609 others. 1 person remains missing. According to investigative committee, all of the attackers were detained after fleeing the scene and attempting to reach Ukraine by car. All 19 individuals charged in connection with the attack are ethnic Tajiks. There are 4 alleged gunmen their names of them are citizens of Tajikistan. All through the Islamic State Khorasan province, ISIS-K regional offshoot of the Islamic State jihadist group, claimed responsibility for the attack. Russian President Vladimir Putin suggested at the time that Ukraine may have played a role. Kiev has denied any involvement, but well, now investigative committee is openly and directly saying that this attack was conducted to benefit Kiev regime. All these terrorists were trying to flee to Ukraine, and I think Russian leadership has additional legal reasoning to designate Western-backed terrorist regime of Zelensky as such, as a terrorist regime, and hopefully this will be done. And of course, such a decision will untie hands of Russian security services and Russian militaries to deal with all those terrorists that are used by Western ruling class, Western collective Western, to harm Russian society. So it might happen, by the way. Maybe in relatively short time, Moscow will make exactly such a decision, and this Western-backed terrorist regime of Zelensky will be officially designated as a terrorist organization. RIA Novosti is reporting that elite special forces regiment of the armed forces of Ukraine had suffered heavy losses near Sumy. As you know, dear friends, Russian troops are conducting offensive operations, sectoral scale offensive operations in the Sumy region to create a buffer zone And due to lack of manpower, Kiev regime is beginning to send its elite troops as ordinary ground forces into a battle. And that happened exactly with this regiment that this report is about. So let's go through some details here. Elite special forces of the Ukrainian armed forces are suffering significant losses in the Sumy region. Russian security agencies told the RIA Novosti in the Sumy direction, where active military operations are taking place. The Ukrainian army is forced to use elite units as a regular infantry due to shortage of personnel, the agency source said. Thus, there are 6 separate special forces regiment Rangers was urgently transferred to Yunakovka settlement, but a week later it had to be withdrawn from the front line due to heavy losses. And well, that means that regiment lost its battle capability, and in that case, this unit either lost at least 30% of military personnel or more. And potentially they lost actually more military personnel. And this information is quite indicative of what is happening right now on the battlefield. Kiev regime is experiencing huge shortage of manpower. And yet again, I guess, probably at this point, we all are guessing when exactly Kiev regime's defense line is going to collapse like domino, with domino effect, because clearly this is coming. It's only a matter of time, and we will see total collapse of Kiev regime's defense lines. It just seems absolutely inevitable. And let me show you on the map where Yunakovka is, dear friends, in the Sumy region. It's there somewhere. Okay, this is Yunakovka, by the way. This is Yunakovka, a relatively larger settlement, which is partially controlled by Russian forces or partially by Kiev regime's forces. Settlement is disputed right now. And as you can see, dear friends, this area that is colored in red is area that is already been liberated by Russian forces. And well, buffer zone is in process of creation, isn't it? And more time is passing by. This buffer zone is becoming bigger and bigger, although recently we did see relative slowdown of the Russian offensive operations in this direction, but one may have explanation for that. Take a look at this forestry, by the way. Just look at this. It's a massive forest, bigger than some European countries, right? So, so obviously, a huge number of military equipment or personnel can be hidden in this forestry, especially in the summertime when it's all green, right? So therefore, obviously, it will be better to take all the necessary steps to minimize casualties during this offensive operation for Russian side. And that's exactly what Russian troops will do. There is no need to hurry. Operations should be conducted with and are conducted with their focus on minimizing casualties, right? So there is no need to send battalion after battalion to take control over these settlements or the forest. No, things might be done step by step, right? And that's my explanation why this local scale, sectoral scale offensive has slowed down a little bit in the past week also. But yet again, if Kiev is deploying its elite formations in the Sumy direction, by the way, that also can explain this. Russian troops will deal with these elite troops and then will continue progress. So they are same time creating traps, isn't it? Russian troops constantly creating traps. And time after time after time, Kiev regime's forces are finding themselves in these traps. Mainly because Zelensky and his criminal associates have no care about military personnel, by the way, and their lives. And they have demonstrated that so many times that I don't think I have to elaborate on that. And also, let me share with you information that, according to reports, Russian armed forces established full control over their Novosergeyevka settlement, which is right next to border, and also, by the way, Novo-Nikolaevka settlement, which is, and both settlements are right next to border with Dnipropetrovsk region. So on more and more areas, by the way, Russian troops are reaching Dnipropetrovsk region. Operations already are conducted inside the Dnipropetrovsk region. And soon, I guess, we will begin to see creation of large buffer zones in that region too. And eventually, I have no doubts, by the way, that whole Dnipropetrovsk region will be liberated from Western-backed terrorist regime of Zelensky, as it will be done in Kharkov region, Sumy region, Chernigov region, Poltava region, Nikolaev and Odessa regions, of course, obviously too. You know my take on the fate of Ukraine. I believe once this conflict will end, once Western ruling class will acknowledge that they lost this proxy war against Russia and main phase or active phase of military hostilities will end, vast majority of territory of this former Soviet republic will end up either joining Russia or under Russian influence, and the western part of Ukraine most likely will be reclaimed by Poland, Hungary, and Romania. That's my take. From Kharkov to Odessa, all these territories that are historical Russian territories, by the way, cities, villages, everything is built by Russians, right? People there living are Russians. So these regions will join Russia, most likely. They will have opportunity to vote, to cast their votes in referendums. And I have no doubts that vast majority will vote to join Russian Federation. And if Moscow will make political decision for whatever reason to maintain statehood for Ukraine, then that state will remain as a landlocked one on the political map, is exclusively in the Russian zone of influence, and state will be like Kiev and there are just a couple of surrounding regions. That's about it. Like Austria, by the way, approximately that size, right? This is my reading of the big picture in regards to fate of this former Soviet republic. Let's continue with more news, and the TASS news agency is reporting that the Russian army entered the Serbianka settlement in DPR and is pushing the Ukrainian armed forces out of the village. This information is coming from military expert Andrei Marochko. Many members of our community are, of course, familiar with this person. He constantly reports about developments on line of contact. RIA Novosti is also reporting, and this is very important, dear friends. Yesterday, I spoke about it in the second update, that well, according to Russian military intelligence, Russian Foreign Intelligence Service, Serbian military industrial complex increases export of military products to Ukraine. So, according to information received by Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service, SVR, the Ukrainian military is very grateful to Serbian manufacturers of weapons and munition for their contributions to maintaining the combat capability of the Ukrainian armed forces. In Kiev, they note that Serbian military industrial complex enterprises, despite their increasing pressure on Belgrade from Moscow, are increasing their export of military products to the zone of confrontation between collective West and Russia. In many ways, this become possible due to use of indirect supply schemes. Their Foreign Intelligence Service of the Russian Federation is stating this is second time in last several weeks when when SVR is highlighting this topic, and the first time President of Serbia Vučić stated that he did not know that this was happening and he will take care of the situation, but seems like he did nothing, literally nothing. And Vučić reacted again on this information from Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service, and we have this information now that Serbia has temporarily stopped all the munition exports and will focus on replenishing its domestic stockpiles. President Alexander Vučić announced on Monday. The move came in response to Russian accusations that Belgrade has been secretly supplying arms to Ukraine. And you know what? I have lost any trust to Serbian leader Vučić, and therefore I just don't believe anything that comes from this person no more. He is total disgrace of Serbia, I believe. This is my personal opinion, by the way, because he had many weeks to do something about this situation, and he did nothing. And this cannot be justified, absolutely. So this person cannot be trusted, and I hope Serbian people will deal with this situation, man. They deserve better leadership, actually, right? And there is a Dodik, by the way, isn't it, in Republika Srpska, true patriot of Serbia, true patriot of Serbian people. And why would not Serbia should have a leader like that? Who the hell is this Vučić, by the way, that is tries to sit on 10 chairs simultaneously while playing for all sides? Come on, man. Serbia can do better. RT is also reporting that, well, a US senator that you are all familiar with, war hawk and disgrace of humanity, actually, Lindsey Graham is doubling down on a sanctions bill that would impose penalties on India, China, and Russia for their alleged actions in furthering their Ukraine conflict. The Sanctioning Russia Act of 2025 was introduced in the US Senate in April and would place significant tariffs, 500% tariffs, by the way, that was initial claim, on goods and services exported by countries that buy oil, natural gas, uranium, and petroleum products originated from Russia. We have a quote from Senator Graham. I've got 84 co-sponsors for a Russian sanction bill that is an economic bunker buster against China, India, and Russia for Russia's brutal invasion of Ukraine. I said yesterday while commenting on this news in second live stream that it is hilarious, isn't it, when any representative of collective West country, especially US, is talking about invasion of other countries or military operations of other countries. After all, US unprovokedly invade so many countries in this world, while Russia is conducting absolutely justified special military operation to protect itself. And at this point, only idiots might have any doubts. Only total morons might have any doubts that this conflict was provoked intentionally by collective West countries, right? Come on, man. And they were working on that since 2008 when collective West countries, during that was Bucharest NATO summit, isn't it? Invited Ukraine to join, and Georgia also, by the way, to join NATO. And while doing so, very same NATO countries basically killed that Budapest memorandum, according to which Ukraine should stay neutral, right? Forever. And since then, by the way, NATO countries were pushing closer and closer to grab Ukraine. In 2014, they conducted their coup d'etat, bloody coup d'etat, right? And began building military bases there. So nothing to be said about constant arms supplies to Kiev regime that was engaged in a genocide of Russian speakers in eastern Ukraine, in Donbass. So did Russia had reasons to take action? Of course. Of course. Only morons cannot see this, by the way. And Lindsey Graham is, of course, moron, right? And absolute disgrace of humanity. But anyways, one should keep in mind, dear friends, that, if this bill will be implemented, which originally, as originally was reported, will introduce 500% tariffs on the countries that are cooperating with Russia in economical and political terms. Import of goods from these countries will be sanctioned with 500% tariffs, which means that certain goods in US would either disappear if this bill will be implemented, will either disappear from the shelves or will become 200, 300, 500% more expensive. So this bill actually is a economic bunker buster for U.S. economy, not for economies of China, by the way, for which trade with U.S. is only like 15%, and definitely not for India, by the way, but for U.S. But yet again, these morons that are put in a position of power in U.S. by military-industrial complex, by Zionists, Israeli lobby, and globalists, and so on, they don't care about their fellow citizens, right? They never did. They do whatever they are told to do by their sponsors. That's all. And they have demonstrated that so many times, by the way, in US and in Europe. I mean, take a look at the actions of the Brussels. I mean, it's just unbelievable what Brussels is doing, you know, while pursuing its sick, literally sick ideology or geopolitical goals to defeat Russia, break up Russia, and basically grab all the riches of Russia. While pursuing these sick goals, they are literally destroying livelihoods of millions of people in Europe by destroying local economies. And I mean, at this point, everyone should be able to see this, right? It's just too obvious. But anyways, let's see what is going to happen. I guess soon Trump will begin escalating with Russia again. Now he will have little more time, right? Because lately he was more focused on Middle Eastern developments. Now he will start posting about Russia every day or every other day. And probably that bill is going to be introduced, or maybe they will decrease level of tariffs from 500 to, I don't know, 20%. Or maybe they will remove that topic completely, because it will harm US first of all. But you never know, man. With these morons, you just never know, right? Also interesting news that I think worth our attention. I spoke about it yesterday, but this is important. I think worth to repeat. So Russian Navy warship has openly escorted their tankers of the so-called Shadow Fleet through their English Channel for the first time, according to maritime analyst Mark Douglas of the Starboard Maritime Intelligence Ltd. Automatic identification systems data from June 16 showed coordinated movement between the corvette Boyki and the Russian warship, and their two sanctioned tankers, the Selva and the Sierra. The convoy was heading to Russian ports, presumably to load oil. And I guess once they are loaded, and maybe they're already been loaded, when they will move to other destination, maybe same Russian warship, maybe another one will take care of their security, I guess. And also, by the way, I think there are quite a number of PMCs in Russia, and they will be contracted, most likely, to provide armed security on board of the vessels themselves from all sorts of criminal actions and the criminals that NATO might deploy to hijack those vessels, right? Although when there is a Russian warship that are escorting these convoys, I doubt that NATO will dare to attack these vessels. But anyways, dear friends, I predicted that NATO's illegal and hostile actions against Russia, including in the Baltic Sea, would entail retaliatory actions by Moscow, including escorting commercial vessels by warships of the Russian Baltic and North Sea fleets. And this is exactly what is happening. And now, one careless step by NATO countries, and they will receive a worthy response. That's what is going to happen. And let's hope NATO will not dare to check Russian militaries, because they're gonna receive some response, by the way, on that. right? And yet again, as I said many times before, Baltic Sea is definitely one of the places where we might see direct clashes between Russian and NATO militaries, which is very unfortunate, obviously. But yet again, it's NATO, it's a collective West that constantly escalates with Russia. By the way, it's not us. We are not looking for this fight. We are ready for it, and we can give a good fight. But we don't want to be engaged in this destructive stuff, right? We want to be engaged in some normal relationships, not in wars. But if collective West wants to, then we can smash their freaking faces. I mean, we can do this. You know, what can I say? RT is reporting, and I'm gonna end this news segment, by the way, on this news that Calvin Klein files to restore trademark in Russia. U.S. fashion brander Calvin Klein has joined a growing number of foreign companies seeking to reestablish their trademark in Russia more than 3 years after halting operations following the escalation of the Ukraine conflict and subsequent Western sanctions. And you know what? I hope no Calvin Klein nor any other Western company that left Russia will be allowed back. I really hope so, because we don't need them. I mean, really, vast majority of us ordinary people can live perfectly okay without Calvin Klein or German cars or I don't know, man, anything from the West. Really, I mean, from French, this blue cheese and that kind of stuff. We can live perfectly happy, right, without all of it. It is what it is, man. And I think it will be really unjust to Russian consumers if Russian government will allow these freaking companies to come back on Russian market. It's unjust, by the way. They betray trust of Russian customers, right? So why should they be allowed to come back? Any of these companies, by the way, in any field, right? This is my personal take. I don't want these Western companies to be allowed back into Russia. We truly don't need them, right? And I think vast majority of society here in Russia are on the same page with me. Some people cannot live without French freaking blue cheese, but I can. And vast majority of us can, right? There is a great cheeses that are made here in Russia, by the way, and in friendly countries, right? But anyways, I'm sharing this information just to let you know that this number of companies, Western companies, is really growing that want to come back on Russian market. And there almost every other day we have reports that this company is registering its trade marks, other company, and this and that. And I'm afraid eventually, at least majority of them will be allowed to come back on Russian markets, but I'm against it. Anyways, that's my take on that. And okay, anyways, let's end there. And I have nothing against those Western businesses that actually stay on Russian market, right? And there are many, by the way, Western businesses that, despite the pressure from Western psychopathic or political so-called class, did not bow down and continue to work with their customers. And those companies are more than welcome, obviously, to further develop their presence on the Russian market. But ones that flee Russian market, betray Russian customers, and then many of them began financing Western-backed terrorist regime of Zelensky, by the way, those companies should not be allowed back. For example, Renault, by the way, car manufacturer, should not be allowed back in Russia, right? Because recently there was reports that they're going to start building drones for Western-backed terrorist regime of Zelensky. So what the hell? Why should these hostile entities be allowed to make money here in Russia, in one of the most lucrative markets in this world? Do I have a point, by the way? Anyways, this is it for a news segment for this first news update, dear friends. As I said, most likely later on today, I will publish on Patreon and Boosty second news update. And there, if you can, dear friends, please consider to join our communities on Patreon and Boosty, Patreon or Boosty, by the way. It will be great support because support on Patreon and Boosty allows me to have a more or less good understanding of the finances that I can operate with for next month. Right, when with donations, and I'm grateful for all the support, by the way, of course, from all the support platforms. But with donations, you just never know. One day you might have donation, next day no. 1 week you might have a more or less, good standing financially. Next week no. But when with Patreon and Booster, you just can see level of support. So if you can, please join us there. Link is on this video in the description box and in the pinned comment. And let's have a little chat now, isn't it? This update is 1.5 hours already. Okay, let's take 15-20 minutes to exchange opinions on some stuff. As always, dear friends, this capital Q before a question, or if entire sentence is in capital letters, does make it easier to notice the question. I'm scrolling now through chatter. And dear friends, sorry if I miss your question, but yet again, you can always use to send your question the support platforms, isn't it? And in that case, I will not miss it for sure. I see no questions, by the way. I see a lot of comments, and I'm happy that our community is exchanging opinions in real time. This is great, by the way. But when it comes to questions, I don't see one. And I guess there was no... super chat also on Rumble. Otherwise, my wife would tell me. So, okay, dear friends, this is a relatively new feature, isn't it? This short Q&A after the news segment. So therefore, I will end this update now, if I may. Thank you all for your attention, for your time, for your support. Have a wonderful, peaceful day, and take care. Bye for now.